All right, here we go. Another episode of the Pure Athlete Podcast. I am here with, again, the athletic trainer herself, Erin Ruggieri. I'm Dr. Dustin Boston. We have a special guest today, Mr. Brett Graves. Super excited to have you on. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
So we are, again, dropping a podcast at least every week.
Yeah.
This is going to be another one of those bonus podcasts. So we are going to drop this on a Friday, but we're going to be linking things always back to student athletes, bridging the gap in resources for themselves, parents, and that's kind of what I've talked to you about off the air, Brett. So as we jump in, we'll be talking more about Brett's experience, but one thing we want you guys to do is make sure you subscribe, like the podcast, share it out. We are truly trying to do good things for student athletes, how we're raising them up, how we're growing them, giving them resources like we talked about earlier and we're about to talk about. So make sure you subscribe, give us feedback, give us a little hate. That only makes us better too. But we're super excited to be on, Brett. We're going to ask all the typical St. Louis questions. For those of you that don't know or haven't followed us yet, we are in the St. Louis area. So I just want to kind of start with your story.
Yeah.
Where'd you come from? How'd you grow up? Give us the family background and just kind of walk into it, and we'll kind of pick you apart as we go through it. Fair enough?
Deal. No, I'm from right here, actually, off the air. We were just talking about. I actually grew up, right here behind the shop. So really close from this kind of St. Charles area initially, and then went to Mizzou, Howell High School. Went to Mizzou, and then got drafted by Oakland. And kind of went through the circuit there of professional baseball. Played at every level and had a great time. Had a great time. I'm probably about 2 years removed from it now, and into some more business stuff. And my family and I live out in Winsville now. So just this area, the St. Louis area in general, especially like St. Charles, means a lot to me. Just from a community that I feel like invested and like poured in so much to me. That I always felt like so well supported. I always felt like that through my path or through my journey, I wouldn't be where I am today without, a couple of, key members like within that community, whether it be high school or college, or even as I got older in professional baseball. And now, honestly, even in business too, that, I've just been really thankful for them, for the community and the way it's like supported me, I guess, through my whole journey. So. Yeah.
And I feel like that, just kind of jumping here a little bit, but I feel like across even professional sports, you hear that a lot about St. Louis and people who play here.
Yeah.
You hear that a lot from, people who have played for the Cardinals and people that come back. Somebody like Lance Berkman stands out. It's like, man, it was one of my funnest eras was playing in St. Louis. Yeah. So it's super cool to grow up here. I think it's a very underrated area as far as what life is like, but also a talent pool now. I think we're probably one of the most underrated areas. Yeah. I truly believe, especially in baseball and the dance world. I say that all the time, so it's kind of cool. And with what you're doing now, which we'll jump into here in a minute, but what year did you graduate high school?
High school, 2011.
Okay. And so go back through childhood. Obviously, we'll get into, you got drafted by Oakland, so let's backfill. And when did you start playing baseball? When did you know, or when did you feel like you had that ability? It's like, you know what? Or did you ever know?
Yeah.
Take us through that.
Well, I started playing baseball from the minute, I could pick up a baseball. I've got an older brother that's 7 years older than me, so, just some great memories just in the backyard playing with the ball every minute we could till the sun went down.
So you had to get good quick.
And,
He's 7 years older.
My butt for a long time. No, I'm kidding. I remember, like, growing up, like, even if we weren't playing an actual baseball game where we were pitching to each other, like, him throwing me like diver pop flies across the across the backyard or whatever. I come back in, I got mud and grass stains all over. My mom's like, "What have you been doing?"
Yeah.
But just had that, like, I don't know, just had that passion, drive, motor, I guess, for it from the time I could pick up a baseball. And really, it was all sports as I was a kid. Like I always loved baseball and never stopped to consider until I got much older that, like, what it actually was going to look like to pursue baseball.
Did you play anything else?
I played football, I played basketball, I played soccer when I was like real little. Through my high school years, I played baseball and football the whole time. And I love playing football, honestly. I've kind of said off the record a couple times to a couple people, it's like, man, if I was a little bit bigger, I definitely would have tried to pursue football probably more because
Heard that before?
Yeah.
I just loved playing. Like, you just can't compare to, like, my only taste of it obviously was in high school, but Friday Night Lights, like, it just didn't compare to
nothing better.
And I loved it, and we had some success while I was at Howell, and St. Charles County success, I guess.
Yeah.
We made it.
Yeah.
We made it. We had some good seasons. We had some good players. I personally had a great experience there. I feel like that time frame with those people and those coaches really shaped a lot more of my character, motivation, discipline than anything else in my entire life. I feel like that's like what prepped me to be an athlete here, whereas a lot of the baseball things obviously prepped me to be an athlete more here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of those things that I feel like I did well at the next levels, I feel like stemmed from the challenges, adversity, and community that I was supported with in those high school days of like playing like football. And I've attributed almost any of my ability to be disciplined or overcome adversity to those like time frames. When I was in high school, baseball was, I was talented.
Yeah.
There's a huge talent gap, I feel like, between your top high school baseball player and your bottom high school baseball player. I never felt like this was easy for me, so I don't want to like distort,
Right.
Like maybe what it was, but I was undersized for playing football. I wasn't your prototypical quarterback, build, like I ran for over 1,000 yards, but I wasn't fast. I'm not fast, like I don't really know how I did it.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, like never been a top end speed 40 or 60 yard dash person. Wasn't ever the strongest one in the weight room. Man, it just mattered a lot to me. And like, I feel like I used my brain probably pretty well. I joke about it still to this day with some buddies that like, the style of offense that we were in for a high school team or a high school quarterback is just like unheard of. I threw the ball between 40 and 50 times a game almost every.
Oh, wow.
By the time I was a senior, like we played with all the risk coaches and everything, like they let me audible to my own plays, like, which you just don't hear of, like as a high school. And like we had that trust and like we had that accountability too, because there was plenty of times where I messed something up and it was like, hey, what the heck are we doing?
Right.
But it was fun. The environment definitely was like a high trust environment, but all that was earned like in a mutual kind of way. But as far as like baseball is concerned in that, I could throw 90 as a sophomore in high school. So I had like a lot of the check boxes of maybe the talent things like early on.
Sure.
Like I committed to Mizzou early, played on the 18U travel team from the time I was in high school, like, or whatever,
Right, right.
So like I was on all those top teams, got drafted out of high school that I ended up turning down. So like in my head, that was just, by that age, baseball was just such the clear, obvious route for me because of that, probably because of just like overall size and, challenges that football was presenting me as a high school athlete, as opposed to maybe some of the things that I was just ahead of the curve on for baseball. I still was undersized. I was 6 foot, 160 pounds, maybe, like when I graduated high school, and could throw 94, you know what I mean? So like we were just talking off the air before. It's like if I knew what I knew, about just how to gain weight or something like that, because I would tell you at that time frame that I'm eating as much as I can, and it's like BS, man. My nutrition was just atrocious. I'm drinking way too much soda. And have no idea how many calories I'm consuming, and no perception of how
or
much
where they're
protein.
coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just, especially being as active as I was and metabolism so high that like you're just combating all that too. So you got to double down on the calories.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess basically through that high school journey, like football like really drove me, I think, mentally to get better. And then like baseball, I saw success on the baseball field that like I don't even know how to describe it. I'm kind of at a loss for words for it, but in my head was like expecting it more.
Sure.
Like I expect.
There's a level of that
Yeah.
I wish a lot of student athletes had. And, like we were talking beforehand and even last week at your place, it's like, it is different. The mentality, the IQ, like you were saying, to, I feel like you and I have traveled a similar road where it's just like, hard work beats talent every day, but there's also something to be said about having a high IQ about the game and being able to visually, like physically, visually seeing what's going on, whether it's a football field, a baseball field, basketball, hockey, whatever, to literally have sight vision and then vision and understand,
be able to dissect quickly
what's going on. And so I think you're 100% right. And that's why, we started this podcast. That's why we launched the Pure Athlete over a year ago, was because it's based around physical, mental, and relationships and all those categories. So physically, like you're saying with the nutrition side, it's like, man, looking back, it's like, man, how much protein should I have been eating? And us being able to solve for that now is super cool, because it's like, and as we get into what you're doing now, I'll leave you to say that, but as we transition into that, it's like the things that we're doing separately together are for the same population of people, so they don't have the same story we had. It's like the hindsight. It's like, damn, if I'd only knew what I knew. Like, let's put something together where we can get them farther faster and let them decide if they have every resource available, from nutrition to the mental aspect to the vision and the qualities it takes. It's like, I will take a C player if they're willing to have the IQ, learn the game, and build them up. So it's like, let's just get them better, growing better, faster, and have the hard conversations about, okay, mentally, what does that look like? But it's a breath of fresh air to hear somebody who's in a different class of business and what it is you're doing with your training, and to be on the healthcare side, but we're talking the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're on the same mission.
It's the human body and the human brain. It really doesn't matter what your objective is. The process is very similar, especially the further you zoom out, So.
Right. So then take us. So you turned down being drafted out of high school. You go to Mizzou. So take us from Mizzou to Oakland.
Yeah. So early on in my Mizzou career, big time like learning curve adjustment. I feel like.
How so?
How does Brett's talent stack up against more of a national talent base? Because all I had been really exposed to before was very Midwesterny, and then even deeper, like locally. So
that gap you're talking about starts to narrow.
Yeah, big time. Big time. And I go back to my old high school, and I talk to some of the players there, some of the classes there, and that's probably the biggest thing. One of the biggest things I try to articulate to them is just that, like, right now is the biggest gap that you're going to ever have. And just like showing up and working hard, you're going to beat so many of those people, right? Then you're going to go to the next spot. And for me, that was Mizzou. And you're going to keep working that hard, but then there's going to be so many other people there that work just as hard as you.
Yep.
When you get in an environment where you're shoulder to shoulder with people who work just as hard as you, what separates you from them, you know? And having to see that, have the awareness of it is the first thing, like being aware of like what it is, but then also identifying what those things are and then trying to maximize those things. Because at some point, you can't just keep working harder. Like time is fixed. Like doing 3 workouts in a day is not like gonna get you there, Right. And I actually just put something out on my personal YouTube about that same sort of thing about like working harder versus working smarter, and working smarter once you've checked the box of what the work ethic is necessary, right? Like we're not trying to like reinvent the wheel, because I think also a lot of people get distorted with what they see on social media these days, right? It's like, well, why are you doing this single leg exercises with 4 bands connected to you when you can't even freaking squat right in the first place, So like checking the boxes of like, foundational understanding, like the progression, I guess, that needs to take place in those moments. But then also understanding maybe where I can work smarter, in those things. So to relate it, I guess, back to my Mizzou time frame is I tried to figure out, like, how does my talent stack up here? What am I good at? What defines me as a player? And through adversity, any time anybody goes through adversity, you kind of have this self-reflection time frame of like, look in the mirror, and it's like, well, who am I as a player? How like, what makes me good? Get back to like the root of like who I am. And I threw 50 innings as a freshman at a Power 5. We were in Big 12 still then at the time, So like, at a Big 12 school, like I threw a lot of innings for a true freshman, you know.
Yeah.
I remember throwing a 7-inning shutout against Kansas State, you know, but then I also remember not getting out of the first inning. So it was like, it was just like this, you know, like,
Yeah.
so I don't want to make it seem like it was all like bad. I think what it did really well is prep me for my sophomore and junior years.
Yeah.
And especially that summer, I went going to play summer baseball, getting to kind of maybe remove myself from an environment that I felt. You feel pressure, like you feel pressure to perform on that, and like you know, any athlete deals with that, especially the higher level that you go, right? So like maybe getting out of that environment a little bit, being able to like self-reflect and develop a little bit, and then like feel prep myself to get back into that environment and now execute, you know, because it's really hard to develop and execute in the same bubble. You know? So that's kind of how my journey turned. You know, I went and had a pretty good freshman summer that year. I came back and kind of nose to the grindstone, kept trying to like figure some things out. And then I was our Saturday starter, which in college baseball, right, is your number 2 guy. I was our Saturday starter every game that year. And didn't throw a ton of innings. They didn't like overexpose me, if you will. You know, it's not like I was throwing to the 7th or 8th inning, but I was steady. Pitched on Saturday, gave you 5 innings, kept team in the ball game, but wasn't really anything ever. Just that was like eye popping, you know.
Yeah.
The progression for me then going to my sophomore college, you know, experience was lights out. Like to me, that was like where the hurdle like was.
Yeah.
That like I had a decent year, and I very clearly like had goals, direction, and like objectives that I knew I needed to do. Because my goal was always to get redrafted after being drafted as a senior in high school. My goal was always to get drafted again. And so like I had these very clear goals that I would write down and think about every freaking day that like I wanted to accomplish, you know?
Well, so let me interrupt you for just a second, because this is what I want to know before I forget it. Is so getting drafted, you said your goal is getting drafted again. Let me ask you this. Why were you drafted the first time? Why did they want you out of high school? What did they see?
An athletic thrower and a, you know, projectable velocity. Like I probably hit some of those tools that like are critical for a success in baseball, you know.
Okay.
And the reason you draft a high school senior as a pitcher is probably a lot different than why you draft a college junior as a pitcher.
It's exactly why I wanted to answer the question before you got
Yeah, I was
there.
like, I want to know.
Skill, yes. As a junior, it's much more skill based. As a senior in high school, it's much more potential. You know, like what you have the potential to kind of
Sure.
you know do, and a lot of that is like things you can't really control. Like
Yeah.
I'm not 6'5". You know, I was the smallest pitcher on almost every freaking professional pitching staff I was on. You
Yeah.
know, like if not like tied for the same. You know, like there was very few people that were smaller than me, whether it be height or weight. You know.
Sure.
So so high school, that's like accentuated because like I shared before, like I didn't eat well, really like thin frame, you know, like
They just knew you could throw hard and you could place the ball.
and that like I was athletic, right? Like
Yeah.
the quarterback journey for me, like I was an athletic thrower and mover, you know, so like
Let's get him before he goes to the
Yeah.
NFL.
Yeah.
no, not that. Certainly not that. Certainly not that.
Scoop 'em
Just-
up.
Yeah, just the ability to throw the baseball athletically, meaning like I could control my body and repeat my delivery, I think is what scouts like would probably attribute that.
Yeah.
But then as a college junior, you're looking at, you know, pitch shapes, how you execute against higher level hitters, you know, SEC hitters at that time for me. We transitioned from the Big 12 to SEC while I was at Mizzou.
Okay.
My freshman year, we were in the Big 12, and then my sophomore and junior years, we were in the SEC. So, like, you're watching against other, like, first-round draft picks I
Yeah.
faced, you know, for those 3 years. And, you know, so watching how, like, you perform against them, if you're timid or not, do you attack the strike zone, you know, like, how your pitches move, what your breaking pitches, like, look like, you know. I got drafted in the 3rd round, so, like, I got drafted in the 26th round out of high school by the Cardinals, and I got drafted in the 3rd round by Oakland out of Mizzou. And so, like, in that magnitude, it's definitely like you still have like some projectability thoughts in there, obviously, because you're not looking for somebody to come pitch in the big leagues the next year. You know, like definitely not in the 3rd round. Like maybe the top end of the 1st round, you start to have those considerations if it's the right player.
Sure.
But you know, you're talking much more like skill-based, polish-based, you know, things that they're looking for in that time frame for sure. So those were a lot of my things. To relate it back here real quick, those were a lot of the things that I saw and assessed after my sophomore spring. That's like, okay, well, I've got to be able to hold my velocity at a certain level and not just show it and flash it. Like I've got to be able to land my breaking ball for strikes, and I got to be able to like strike people out with it. I need to be able to get to the 7th and 8th inning before I was only getting to the 5th or 6th inning, because you can go back and look at objective data about, I don't care who the person is, you can go back and say, well, Johnny got drafted here and here's what his measurables and success look like. And, Eric got drafted here and here's his, so I had these goals. I told my dad from the jump, I want to get drafted in the top 5 rounds and just set the bar high. Why not? I had no idea if it was feasible at the time. I just was like, that would be cool, So that was my goal, like kind of setting out. So what I clearly did was backtrack that and said, well, what do I need to accomplish, from a success standpoint, how do I have to perform on the field, but then also like what do my measurables look like, it's probably not as crazy as the NFL combine would be, but there's like definitely certain measurable things that like you got to be able to do to like get drafted in a consideration like that, velocity being a key metric, and breaking ball velocity probably being a pretty key metric
absolutely
too, so those are all things I set my sights on, and like center my training around and really go back to that more development friendly circumstance, and like really was able to hone in so that then when I came back for my junior year, it was like game on. Let's go. It's go time now. It's time to execute. All of that was prep, and now if I want this, it's time to execute, and
who did you during that time, because you said that sophomore was like the hurdle. It sounds like that was like the okay,
light bulb,
I got it. When you came back, like what was, you're kind of making this sound like this was a you thing. I mean, talk about some IQ. I mean, were you already looking at some of these data and these metrics that deep? I mean, you're talking about pitch shape, you're talking about those polished skills. I mean, me being a catcher on the other side, I mean, I too, had an opportunity to go. I turned it down too. So I'm sitting here geeking out because I was the catcher on the other end, like coming out to have a conversation with you on the mound. We didn't play together. I'm 5 years older than you are. But I mean, I can hear some of the conversations I had with some of the pitchers when I was under the Tampa Bay organization for a while. And so, but when you came back before your sophomore year, what resources did you use, or is this just Brett getting to the books and figuring it out?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I feel like a lot of the credit, I feel like, for encouraging me to do that stems from some guys that I played with at Mizzou that were a little bit older than me. Yeah. That one of my best friends, his name's Rob Zistrizny, he's still pitching with Pittsburgh this past year,
Pittsburgh fan, I don't care what anybody says. Pitt and Cardinals.
He's a left-handed pitcher. He was a year ahead of me. My sophomore year, where I was the Saturday starter, he was the Friday starter. So we had a really great working relationship. We pushed each other. So to get to see him go through it a year ahead of me, and then also being able to just sit in the clubhouse and be like, hey, what are you doing? You know what I mean? He poured a lot into me. But then even then, I can remember my junior year. At this time, he got drafted in the second round, had a great junior season, and measurables were great, drafted super high, awesome. I was like, well, it gave me confidence because that's my guy, that's my buddy, and the way I operate is well, if Rob can do it, so can I. So
100%.
It gave me a lot of confidence. Whether it was true in the moment or not,
why tell yourself anything different?
100%. It's what filled my brain. So then being able to pick up the phone when I was a junior and be like, hey man, I'm struggling with this, what's up? He was just so there for me in my corner all the time, and my guy, like I said, so I feel a lot of credit is there. When I start to talk about data and my journey like that, it's nowhere near the magnitude of what we're into now. Even then, we weren't pulling the same sort of data points that we have access to these days. I'm really talking about your basic, what you hear on Fox during the World Series. You know what I mean? What the mile an hour needs to look like. What type of ERA. Stuff that really probably didn't matter, but to me was my guiding light on how I was looking to execute. I knew that the velocity, just from having talked with scouts, the velocity on my breaking ball mattered to them, and then my average velocity. I'm talking about very basic data points. These days we're talking about movement profiles and
So many things.
vertical attack angles, and biomechanic like data points, like how your body moves to deliver the pitch and what sort of bias and tendencies you have that optimize or at least like point to you being able to throw a better certain type of pitch based off of movement biases, pronation, supination biases. That's not at all what Brett was looking at. I'm talking about I need to throw this hard. I need to pitch this long in the games. I need to strike out this many people, and I want my ERA to be this or lower.
Right.
Like very basic.
Yeah.
Very basic.
I may not throw 98 miles an hour all game, but my ERA is going to be under 3.
Yeah, I got it. And I gotta like get to the 8th inning, and I gotta strike this many people out, or whatever, and I didn't strike a whole lot of people out, but like if I had this kind of like pecking order, which every pitching coach really that's worth their weight, like will kind of help you prioritize it this way, but which of like swings and misses are good, strikeouts are great. If we don't get a swing and miss and a strikeout, ball's got to be on the ground. And if it's not on the ground, we prefer a pop-up rate is still okay too. That means they're not seeing it great. And then kind of like we're keeping track of how many hard contacts are being given up. So like those are some of the things that obviously like were in my head and in my brain. But really at the end of the day, it's like I got to hold my velocity and I'm gonna beat you for 8 innings. And that was like the basis of my my thought. So that's the data I was keyed in on.
That's such a key. I mean, that's gold right there. I mean, even for these kids. I mean, for those of you listening, it's those are key points too, because then I automatically flip to the mental side of the game, because the reason I talk about the mental side of the game, just the game side, I love the mental health side. That's a whole different conversation we might not get into today. But what you're talking about too, and having that pecking order, like you said, it's like, swings and misses, strikeouts, but at the end of the day, ball on the ground. They really don't want to see the ball in the air too much because that's still a run, right? So, but at the end of the day, as we get harder on ourselves, all three of us here being high-level athletes, when we get hard on ourselves, it's nice to have that. And like you said, anybody who's worth their weight will kind of take you through that no matter what sport you'll play.
Yeah.
Because when we get hard on ourselves and you look back at so many things you did right and all you're thinking about is that 3-run jack you gave up, and it's like, yes, that's one mistake. But in the mental side of the game, that can screw you up for the rest of the month.
Sure.
Or you can have something to look back on and be like, look, that sucked. Not a great pitch. Don't hang that next time. But look at all these other ones. That's what's important about having that too.
Yeah.
I think personally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's super good. So when you got drafted to Oakland, give us the MLB timeline. What happened when you went to Oakland, or when you went through Oakland?
Yeah. So after being drafted a little bit higher, you get slapped with a nice top prospect tab with a lot of expectations coming in, and I feel like this was true of me every step of the way. The way I describe like my professional baseball experience early on is like big time learning curve. Kind of refiguring out how's my talent stack up again. It was a lot of the same things I had to go through as a freshman. How's my talent stack up? What separates me from my competition? How do I need to maximize what do I need to do to keep advancing levels, and really that's what my brain was focused on. My goal, no part of me was satisfied with getting drafted the way I did and being where I was or making the money or whatever, anything that came with it. It was no, that's just a stepping point for me to get to my ultimate goal. Yeah. So having that as my guiding light never bred any type of complacency. What I feel like I struggled with the most early on my professional experience wasn't so much the competitiveness or the ability to pitch and execute. I think the SEC and big stadiums and good hitters prepared me for that pretty well. I'm going to save this, actually. I'm going to come back to it. I'm strategically going to save this because the way I'm going to describe my early on journey here is you're going to be shocked by what I'm about to say. I struggled physically with the routine, switching from a 7-day schedule to a 5-day schedule. Totally zapped my velocity, my lifting routine, my throwing routine. A lot of it was kind of pushed by the organization because of longevity and health reasons, right? So I bought into it. I tried it. I did it. it really didn't go good for me. It was such a physical, physical thing that it became a mental thing for me, and that's typically how all those things go.
Yeah.
So then I'm like feeling like I'm fighting to keep my head above water, and struggling mentally because I felt at the time a little bit handcuffed, like this was happening to me.
Yeah.
Which is the wrong mentality.
Yeah.
By the way. And
100%.
I had to take ownership of it myself. There was a closed door meeting with front office people when they came into town for Brett to just be like, hey, this isn't working for me.
Yeah.
So I had to take that initiative. And even in that, so that was all those feelings that all happened my first year of professional baseball, lingered into like the first half of my second year, probably too. And then I start to saw some stuff turn the back half of my second year. And you can really like draw some pretty specific correlations between my freshman year at Mizzou, my first year of professional baseball.
Really?
My sophomore year at Mizzou, my second year of professional baseball.
Okay.
Because then my third year, where Brett got his feet on the ground a little bit, I had a little bit of time to like myself to develop, like soul search maybe.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
identify and like attack, And then once I did that, my third year, velocity shot up, pitch execution shot up, learned a really good breaking ball. And that after that year, I ended up getting banged up that year and didn't play the second half. But the first half was so good that Miami felt like they were going to Rule 5 me which for people that don't know what that is, like basically selected me from Oakland's minor leagues to come play in the big leagues for Miami. It's the easiest way I can try to describe it
Yeah.
to grandma, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to my point that I was saving.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was an all-star my first year.
Wow.
I was 6-0. My team like didn't perform very good, so at the time I kind of felt like it was like, well, I was the best out of some guys that weren't performing that great. But I was 6-0. I was an all-star.
That's awesome.
I felt like I had so much more in the tank, though, that like I think that's what my main point in all this was. That like through all of that, through Mizzou, through that early on journey, I just always felt like two different things. I always felt like what I needed was inside of me.
Yeah.
And
Love
I just like
that.
had to figure out a way to like pull it out, right? And then what I needed was inside of me, and that like I always felt like my best days were ahead of me. That like if I could just figure this out, it would be good. You know, and I accomplished those things. Like I got into a situation where I was a little bit older. My career ended earlier than what 24, 25-year-old Brett would have probably told you my expectations were.
Sure.
But we can talk some more about that, like life and business, as we keep going here. But my perspective of success also totally changed in those time frames. Kids and family and stuff into the mix. That like the way 24-year-old Brett defined success was much different than the way 28 or 29-year-old Brett defined success. But I was able to check like a lot of those boxes that like I set out to do. Eventually then got to play in the big leagues the next year. Went back the following year after that, had the best season I'd ever had, high school or college, like combined. Like had a sub-2 through August in AA and AAA. Really identified what I was good at and like executed it well. Stayed healthy because I had some seasons where I was banged up. 20 comes along, COVID, I don't get taken to the alt site, and that's my year where I'm like knocking back on the door and feel like I need to make it back in there. 21, I get hurt a couple games in, and that's a contract year for me, and the rest is kind of history of like some lifestyle decisions, I guess, after that. But really those like early years, for me is like very similar, I think, to like from a high level view of like what Mizzou looked like for me, from like a personal identification and like development process. That like year 3, it was kind of like, okay, like I know what I need to do, like go do it now, so
It's the threes. I'm
Yeah.
telling you.
Always the threes.
It's the threes. No, that was. We have a joke around here. I mean, you've probably seen it around. So my race car panel's up there, but there's 33 principles in chiropractic. My number was 33, and so she's starting to see the 33s. But now you're bringing up threes. Well, that's super cool. And the one thing I pulled out of that off the bat that I think is just another nugget for a lot of people and a lot of future, even professional athletes or athletes that are moving up their ranks, is you brought up such a good point to where it's not a matter of if, it's when. Like the body is designed to stay comfortable. Like, those who are more driven and have that discipline and have that mental fortitude, eventually they too, it's not a matter of if, it's when. But being able to recognize the fact that it didn't happen to me, it happened for me, as soon as it happens and you realize that, it can be a shift.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of, some of the professional athletes, again, in my Rolodex that are still playing or no longer playing too, it can go one of two ways. And this is why the mental aspect for me, just in that regard, is so huge, because, making the lifestyle decisions and the things when family's in the mix, and when this whole thing is always bigger than you. It's always bigger than us, but it can go this way, or it can go an exact opposite direction, where you hear Mark Cuban, handing money to guys that used to be on his roster, and they're out in the middle of the street trying to, scrounge up some money, or their lifestyle or their decisions go the opposite direction.
Right.
So it's like, depending on what your journey looks like, it's, there's so many resources. Having somebody you can call, and having the pride set aside to make the call, to not go in and be too competitive and lose yourself in it. Like, we're going to push each other. I'm after your spot.
Yeah.
But having those people around you that can pour into you or be poured into, and utilizing them as a resource and valuing that is huge.
Yeah, for sure.
It's big time.
Yeah, and that's why I would attribute like a lot of that. It's not like I was sitting there have some big like epiphany or like come to Jesus moment. Like
Right.
for me, like I was always like passionate and like pursuant, but like I just always felt like I had the right person in my corner at the right time.
Yeah.
That it was like of no doing of my own. Like I felt like very fortunate to have
Yeah,
those
it's a
people
blessing
in my
all its
corner.
own.
Yeah, amen. And I wouldn't be where I'm at like without people like that, and every kind of step of my journey. There's people I could even point to, and like while I was playing in the big leagues, and even after, and now in the business, like I feel like extremely fortunate to have those people in my corner for sure.
So contract year, get banged up, things change. We'll talk about, we can brief it a little bit, but I do want to have you back on, and we'll talk about what life after sports can look like. So one of the avenues, because I think you're doing a lot of good things, but so let's talk P3.
Yeah.
And what it is you're doing with that. You're involved in other things, and we'll see each other later tonight, but at the golf facility at Elevate. But let's talk about what you're doing for the game and these young athletes now here in our community.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, really my day-to-day focus, I am in a couple different things, but my day-to-day focus, because this is where like my passion lies, is building this high-performance pitching lab is the way I describe it to people, where we are, uber focused on assessing and prescribing very specific intentional development plans for pitchers. We do it on an individual basis, but then we also do it for some really big Power 5 schools like across the country too, in more of a consulting fashion. And really in a nutshell, it's using high-level data and coaches to assess and evaluate like where players at in an objective data format with a very subjective reading and presentation to an athlete. So it's not just here's all these numbers. It's like, what does this mean? And being able to take all that on the objective front and say, here's what data from high-performing throwers looks like. Here's where your data's at, right? So now you tell me your goals. Okay, your goal's to throw 90. Well, here's what we got to do to throw 90. Here's what your goals are to go play Division I. Well, here's what we need to get to for not just velocity, mind you, because you just throw a 90 at a high school these days. That doesn't guarantee you a spot to go to Division I like it used to.
That has changed completely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are going into play there. The body anatomy, the way the body works, the motor preferences that the body likes to recruit force from.
Motor preferences, not muscle memory.
That's the fancy way to say it. Right?
Muscles don't have brains. There's no memory.
That's right.
I like the verbiage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just like some weight room evaluation, like what kind of force are you producing? So using high level data to kind of give a direction for an athlete, right? And some people come to us just for that analysis, right? They come to us for that analysis, and sometimes we go to the colleges just to give that analysis because the tools are are big and fancy and expensive and you
Yeah.
know, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, we get to work with some awesome schools that really just want to use us for our data collection, which is fine. You know, I love it.
Yeah.
There's some schools that also we go do that for, that then we write like all of their off-season development plans from like a mobility and corrective standpoint, from a throwing program, from a performance plans, right? So all of those same sort of core principles about how we diagnose, how we prescribe, that's what we do for our individual athletes. And then we take the same sort of thing on the road when we go to Iowa or Mizzou or Texas A&M or Duke or NC State, like some big schools that like we're fortunate enough to have trust us, you know what I mean? So a developed process and a proven kind of track record and methods there. And really, truly, like my path came into this, I trained at P3.
Yeah.
You know, like I spent my money at P3 to train there myself. I trained there from 2018 through the end of my career. I was there for 5 years, and one thing led to another, and I said this would be a pretty cool place to be. You know, we're doing some pretty special things. Got a pretty high ceiling, in my opinion. Like, let's do this. You know, I'm all in. So when I talk to people about, you know, you want to get a little bit more of a salesy conversation, it's like, I don't need to tell you anything else other than like I spend my money here. You know, like, I made it to the highest level, and I made it to the big leagues in 2018. After I made it to the big leagues, when I started being like, okay, how am I going to invest in my career? What am I going to do? Like this is what I chose to do. You know, so like I don't need to tell you anything other than that. Like I already made that decision myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And honestly, we've come such a long way since then. But like, you know, 2018 would have still been like good for you. You know.
Sure.
So that's kind of my journey into P3. But yeah, that's kind of what we do in a nutshell, I guess, for our pitchers. We train locally. We train, you know, high school, college, and professional hitters as well. More on the performance side of things, obviously. But we do have a ton of position players. Our guys are throwing experts, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, we can get you up on the mound and do a big biomechanics evaluation, see where your arm's at, you know, front foot contact and you know, all this hip shoulder stuff and pelvis rotation, whatever. But we have a lot of guys that come to us too that just want to be better throwers because they play left field or they play catcher, and that's a very measurable tool for for a recruiter coming to say, like, does this guy check the boxes of the arm, you know, like the arm strength box. So we got plenty of guys that'll come do that as well, you know. So that's basically in a nutshell, I guess, the brand development of ours, you know, the brand, like what people maybe nationally are coming to P3 to do. I just told you earlier, you know, like had a dude fly in from Oregon last month and another dude come in from Maryland, and like they come from all over the place, from Texas, whatever. We're one of the few biomechanics labs that has kind of like a rounded out process where it's like not just a biomechanics lab. We got kind of a rounded out process, like one of the few places to go in the country to do something like that. So we can draw some people in. Most of those people that draw in naturally are pitchers. Yeah. But locally and regionally, like we have a bunch of really good hitters that kind of seek out a performance staff as well, you know, so. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, that's good. And like we had talked, I mean, just across all sports right now, it's just like the athletes and the way they're growing now. And, you know, much like you have done, you know, we've got technology here, and it's going to be fun to see. I'm excited to go into your place and watch some of this happen because it's so essential that people get data on their athletes, period. Like no matter what the goals are. Now that's so good because we ask our clients that all the time. The other student athletes, it's like, okay, now that we have all this data, obviously most of the time it's both the student and the parent that wants it, which is super cool. But we do get different answers when we ask, what's the goal?
Right.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you know, there's a big difference with somebody saying, well, I really want to, you know, go to a D1 school, and somebody being very convicted on like, look, I want to be drafted in the first 3 rounds of whatever sport I'm playing. It's like, that tells me a lot right there. But we've also had some student athletes say, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to go after high school. They might get the health and the wellness aspect. I just know this is super freaking hard on my body, and I've got this, and I know I have this, and I just want to figure out what's wrong, how to fix it, how to strengthen it, how to prevent as much as possible.
Absolutely.
So the data and things that you're doing is
the biggest percentage of people just are focused on being the best high school athlete, whatever level they're at. You know what I mean? Like, and really, truly, like I told you, like I had goals of like to get drafted in the top 5 rounds or blah, blah, blah. I was just trying to be the best college pitcher I could be. You know, like, and most people, like, because you can't think about what I want to do here without, you know, addressing what I need to do now.
Right.
You know what I mean? So most people are just, they have aspirations for sure, but the biggest percentage of people are just like focused on like how can I be the best high school athlete like right now, you know, and that should drive them, but also I think it's kind of a superpower, to be honest with you, for parents or players to step back far enough to say like, okay, this might be a goal for me, but what do I need to do to get there? Not just physically, but mentally too, like immersing yourself in the culture and the community and gaining because then you're just like, you said it earlier, but it's just like an expedited curve of like, you're getting more familiar with like what the expectations will be of you, how you need to physically perform, how you need to mentally perform, like a lot of those things. And the more you can like be in that community, be around people like that, be playing competition like that, be training in a way that the expectation for you that when you train in college is going to be just like this, like you need to be seeking out those opportunities as much as you possibly can. And it costs money in a private world, it just is what it is.
Yeah.
But this was a good piece of advice that I feel like I've heard from my dad, from different people that are like maybe deciding on like what to do. Like, it also costs a lot of money to go to college.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You want a Division I like scholarship or whatever, like you're kind of either paying for this now or you're paying for it later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it just costs
The
what
pain
it
of
costs,
progress
like
or the pain of regret.
Yeah, absolutely. And these days there's so much good stuff, so much more good stuff available for you from a private sector standpoint, that people don't realize like what they have access to, like our journey through it. I'm motivated, you said it earlier, I'm motivated to make sure that like every player that was like me at 15 and 16 and 17, or even at 22, 23, 24, or honestly at 30, you know what I mean, is like better equipped to handle their situation than what I was.
Yeah.
And like that's my personal underlying like motivation. These high school kids that live around here don't understand that like the access that they have because they just have always had it. Like why would they? You don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? A lot of the data, and you'll see people like that too. A lot of the data, like there's people that come in, we take all this high level data and they could care less. Like at the end of the day, the data truly, in my opinion, like I do think people benefit from asking good questions about it and learning from it. But the data, in my opinion, is so much more for the coach to help you figure out your plan, and like being able to articulate it to a player about what this data means and what we're going to do because of it, because those are the things that matter. Like the data doesn't really matter to the player. The action that comes from the data is what matters to the player, right? If
Just
they want to
tell me what I need to
data,
do.
If they want to know the data, do I think in general it's good to be better educated on what you're doing and how you're doing it? Absolutely. Like what are your measurables? How are you tracking? What do we want that number to be next time you come in here? Because that's all motivating things and great.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, that also you could also get into paralysis by analysis, from that as well.
Right.
100%.
So you don't need to know the data. The data is really irrelevant. You need to know the action that needs to come from the data, and like the parents that come in that could care less about it. They care about their goals. They care about, well, how hard am I going to throw? What's my command going to look like? How healthy am I going to
So
be?
can you get them above 90?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Anybody that comes to a business like mine, that's what they care about. That's probably what they're there for, But we obviously know that there's so many other ways to like make that go into being a successful pitcher, other than just velocity. But velocity a lot of times gets you a foot in the door. You know what I mean? You get time to develop when you have velocity, and that's just the fact of the matter. The game values velocity. Like, don't yell at Brett because we're harping on velocity. Like, why don't you go yell at every front office that's promoting guys, signing guys, drafting guys because of how hard they throw? Like it's not me. I'm reacting to what the game wants. You know? Our business is reacting to what the game wants. But we know for long-term success, like velocity, we usually say stuff. I know it's a very baseball slang kind of term, but like stuff meaning like how your velocity is not the only thing that makes pitches good, right? It's like what your movement profiles look like. Is it sink? Does it run? Does it cut? What does it do? Does it, got a vertical break? Where your release is from, because the perception of where the ball's coming from, let these different movement profiles matters a ton. So we would say velocity / stuff.
Yes.
And then we'd say command, obviously huge. And then health. You know what I mean? Because if you have any two of those three and not have the third, it's fleeting. No matter what, no matter any way you want to slice it, you need all three of those to be good and be good for a long time.
Right.
So that's what we try to keep at the focus of all these things when everybody wants to come in and talk about velocity.
Yeah.
No doubt I'm with you. We got to have that, but we also, to be a good pitcher, our goal is not for you to come in here and throw on this bullpen mound and be a all-star bullpen pitcher. When you get out on the mound for your team, we need outs. We need outs, and we need productivity, and your success for that. Will velocity help you? Absolutely. You know what I mean? And that's one of the prereqs for any type of conversations that we have, is that we need to throw harder for sure. What's going to make my slider better? If I keep the same movement profile and I throw 171, I throw it 181, 81 is going to be way harder to hit.
Right.
It's just obvious. It's reaction time, but not losing sight of maybe that whole picture to build complete pitchers. And if you go look at our social media bios, that's why we branded it the way that we do, custom training programs to build a complete pitcher.
Yeah.
It's not just about velocity. It's about all those things, so.
Yeah, and we could dive into the baseball side of that. I'll spare you, but it just brings back a story where, we had a pitcher in our district that ended up getting drafted. So I'm from Cuba, Missouri originally. That's where I graduated high school. Little town, 3,500 people. But one of the kids that we played against ended up getting drafted, and I faced very well against him. And, a lot of the guys, we had one of those teams where it's from second grade all the way through. It was super cool. So so we'd all ask each other, and they're like, Boston, what are you doing? And I was like, look, I said, because of, and this is what you're talking about to your point, because of how he delivers the ball, it's easy. You guys are so wrapped up in the 94 miles an hour he throws. That's all as an opponent, that's what you're thinking about. And this is for the hitters on the other side of the ball, and those pitchers that still hit. Yeah.
He already sped you up before you got in the box.
Exactly.
That's what you're thinking about.
And I was like, don't worry about what he's throwing, because it's really all relative until you get that 97. I feel 97, 98, that's where the relativity change. Yeah. And then from 98 to about 102, and I saw 102 a few times, and that's moving, but it's still pretty relative. Yeah. Even in the race car, for me, it's I tell people, it's oh man, it's all pretty relative. There's a couple breaks, but from 70 to 90, it's still pretty relative going to the corner. But I told him, I was like, if you can just watch his release. If all you do is sit fastball, I don't care. Don't look at how the ball's spinning. If you look at how he releases, he's got work to do. That's why I'm pinging him. I'm picking it up early. You guys are beat by velocity when he doesn't have the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, right.
So he didn't even have to throw a freaking breaking ball. All he had to do was change his delivery, hide a little bit. But because of his mechanics and how he was already way open so early, it made it so easy to see. So it's stuff like that where data points, the biomechanics,
way more that goes into it.
But then also too the health side. If you don't have your health, you have nothing else. And he ended up getting hurt because of how he threw. He was always wide open. He was whipping his arm, and it was just that was it. He got hurt early. So it's I can super appreciate from a doctor standpoint, from an athletic training standpoint, that the data for me, I really don't care about the pitchers that you're seeing. It's it's cool to hear that you're doing that, because the biomechanics of how kids are throwing and how hard they're throwing and how big athletes are now, it's holy cow. If we could have their stature when we were, it's it's crazy. So for you to be able to do that evaluation, super cool. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. Want to end it on a fun one?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So if you were not a pitcher, what position would you play?
Shortstop, no doubt. I already played shortstop, I guess, before. I never.
Cheating. I'm just kidding.
I never. No, seriously.
You don't want to be a catcher, bro?
No chance. No chance.
No chance.
Hockey, goalie, catcher, I'm freaking out, bro. No chance. You get balls chucked at you all day. How's that fun?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
I did not envy especially spring training for a catcher.
Well, because when you walk somebody, I could pick them off for you, and I just pick you up.
I would love that. Yeah, no doubt. I would love that. But the 200 balls that you get chucked at you for the whole game to wear that, I never I laugh about this now because all of the pitching things that I do, I never viewed myself nor wanted to be a pitcher. I was a shortstop. I, was athletic, and if you called me a PO, which stands for pitcher only, or non-baseball, like, it was offensive. You don't call me that. You know what I mean? So, early on, like, I was hitting leadoff for us, and I was playing shortstop and All-State or whatever, and like, that's how I viewed myself.
Yeah.
When I went to Mizzou, actually, in my head, I was still gonna do both, and they had, every recruiter told me that, like, yeah, sure, go on over here, and you can play both ways.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, sweet. I got in there, took like 2 rounds of BP, and they're like, hey, you're gonna be a pitcher. Okay, and at the time, I was like, I had gotten drafted as a pitcher, so I like knew that was my route. I didn't fight it at all. I saw how hard all them boys were all throwing. I was like, yeah, I'm good. But no, seriously, it was like offensive. That was like something I took offense to for sure those days. You know what I mean? Like, you did not call me that, but yeah, I honestly, so I guess maybe a little bit deeper, the sophomore year that I could throw 90, like, I had a huge growth spurt. My freshman year, I was like a pipsqueak, sub 5'5", 100 and I don't even know, 35 pounds. I was like tiny. Yeah. By the time into my sophomore year, I was like 6 foot and 150 something. Like, that's where my velocity, like, really. Cause I always had like good, smooth, like, arm path. Like, that's one thing from an early age. You can look at a kid and be like, yeah, arm path. Like, that's the tip of the spear, right? Yeah. But like, before that, like, I like pitched when my team needed me to. Like, I wasn't a pitcher. I threw 1 inning my freshman year on JV, and like, that's it. Yeah. My sophomore year, like, I didn't really start out the year pitching, but like, I earned my way into like being the pitcher, probably the top pitcher. Like, by the time we made it to like playoffs. Yeah. And then even then, that sophomore summer, I was playing so far up that like, there was way better pitchers than me going to like way better places, so I didn't pitch hardly at all that summer either, just like an inning here, an inning there. But that's when I like really was like developing my arm strength, and like, I was on a good like throwing routine so that I could like become a better pitcher, but like, I didn't get to pitch in the games a whole lot because I was on a really good team. Yeah. So it was after that I was really like, okay, yeah, I'm a pitcher now. Not full-time pitcher now, because that was still, like I said, offensive.
If you need me, if you need me to.
So, yeah, I never wanted to be identified as just a pitcher, because those aren't your athletes, right? Like, your pitchers get made fun of for being uncoordinated, unathletic, a little quirky.
You should see this guy pick up a bat.
Yeah, seriously. Like, you laugh at those guys. So especially with my football and my, I don't know, in my head, I wasn't a pitcher until much later in my life, for sure. So.
What was if I asked this? We had Pierre Desir on a couple weeks ago. I asked him this question. Say you don't get roughed up. You had contract year, just hypothetical. You can go anywhere you want. Anywhere you want. They'll sign the deal you want to sign. Where would you go?
St. Louis. I was such a Cardinal fan growing up. Always admired. I actually, when I was in Miami, I got to pitch against the Cardinals a couple times. I never got to pitch at Busch in a major league game. I pitched there in college. I pitched there in high school, but whatever. I always wanted to play for the Cardinals, especially like looking back, hindsight. I don't wish anything different because my college turned out great. Yeah, I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. I have no what would have happened if like thoughts. Sure. But what would have happened if I would have taken that 26th round draft, because it was from St. Louis, out of high school. Yep. I think I made the right decision, but I wearing a Birds on the bat would have been like cool for me, just a kid growing up in St. Louis, Mark McGuire, fan growing up. He had my orange hair, so he was my guy. Yeah. I was him for Halloween one year, actually. I was a kid.
Drop the photo.
If you look hard enough on Facebook, you can probably find it. But no, it was that would have been cool for me. Honestly, my favorite place I got to play was
that was gonna be my next question.
Yeah, was Fenway.
Really
nostalgic. As far as like all the new stadiums, was probably Atlanta. I really liked Atlanta. If I couldn't pick St. Louis, because of 10-year-old Brett would be like pretty like just if I couldn't pick St. Louis, Atlanta would have been a place I probably picked. Really, the fan base is just like all in, and like you got such a wide part of the country there in that like southeast corner. That's like they're Braves fan all the way over to like Louisiana, to
Charlotte,
freaking everywhere. And then we just had some really cool like games down there, you know, like they packed that freaking stadium out. The stadium, like at the time, was like brand spanking new in 2018.
Yeah.
You know, like pretty cool. Clubhouse was awesome. You know, like pretty cool experience in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So
That's I mean, being a Pittsburgh and a Cardinal fan, I don't know. I mean, obviously you played it. Did you pitch it? Did you pitch at PNC?
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How was that as a backdrop? That's probably one of the most
Oh, it's
beautiful
gorgeous.
backdrops in baseball.
Yeah, that's on the top of my list somewhere.
Yeah.
that I thought Pittsburgh was really, and honestly, even like the setup of where the team hotel was, like it was close enough to walk to the stadium. Like, yeah, I
It's
thought
damn near across the street.
Yeah, heck yeah, it was right
Yeah.
across the bridge actually.
Yeah,
right across
right
the
across
bridge.
Clemente.
Yeah, and you can see the bridge obviously from the backdrop, you know, and then you go across that bridge and you know there was a hotel.
So there is, if you ever, for some reason, end up partnering with, say, Pitt or somebody, you might have done this already. So my dad's family was friends with the owners of the Steelers and the Pirates. My dad grew up in Pittsburgh,
Got it.
so that's my tie.
Got it. Yeah.
But if you haven't, if you ever get the opportunity, because I think I felt this in your Boston reference, is they still have a part of the old Forbes Field in Pittsburgh,
Really?
numbers and all. So it's the right field wall.
Yeah.
And I'm getting chills just thinking about it because you know as well as I do who stood in right field at Forbes Field. It's cool, eerie. It's
Yeah,
like
that's
Mickey
why I
Mantle
liked
stood
Fenway
here.
so much. Yeah, stretching in left field, thinking about all the people, you know, that had
Yeah.
played left field there. You know, when I pitched in Boston during that series, and I remember getting down and being like, "Holy cow!" Like I watched Pedro pitch here. You know, like
David Ortiz.
the '99 All Star game. Like I still remember I was in like first grade, but I remember staying up late to like watch that. You know,
Same
like,
amount as Clemens.
so that yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean every great pitcher that you know that park's seen everybody. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That you know. So yeah, that definitely is like too high on the bucket list to
Yeah.
not say that was my favorite. But you know, like nostalgia aside, like 10-year-old Brett aside, like just like overall circumstance of like a new age park that like
Yeah.
doesn't have any like extracurricular emotional backdrop like feelings to it. That's why I would pick Atlanta.
Sure.
But yeah, the Fenway piece was
Should we ask him the alternate question off of that?
that would
You
be-
don't have to
That
answer.
would be an easy one to guess.
Yeah.
Was my home park.
You wouldn't want to go back to that one.
No, our park was fine. We just didn't get any fans.
Yeah.
You know, it just wasn't a whole lot. We had like 35,000 there for a Yankee game one time. They were all cheering for the Yankees.
Yeah.
Which honestly was fun. I'd rather it be like that.
When did Jeter retire?
Before that, Jeter was the owner while I was there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
That was one of
used
the
the clubhouse a little bit here and there, you know. So
Yeah.
got to interact with them, which was amazing for
yeah
10-year-old Brett, obviously.
yeah absolutely
But yeah, awesome to have somebody like that of baseball experience, just
yeah.
even in the midst of your conversation,
Yeah.
you know, like let alone.
That's something we talk about a lot. You know, us, you know, all of us here, not really being starstruck people, but the respect. I mean, your Jeters, your Clemens, your
It's just
Clementes.
different. Yeah, it's
that's
just a
that's
different
just
level, for
that's
sure.
fangirl city right there.
Yeah,
Like to
no
stand
doubt.
where they stood, and that means something. It's super cool, super cool. As we wrap this up, what would you have to say to student athletes, parents of student athletes? What are some nuggets you can give them to kind of prevent our hindsight conversation? What would you say as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think the core concepts, really big bullet points of what we've kind of hit on, of just like putting yourself in an environment, immersing yourself in an environment that like will help breed and foster what your goals are. You know, like identify what your goals are, and then like do everything in your power to put yourself in that environment day-to-day basis, because that's like how you're going to sharpen your axe. You know, like not by going and like reading something or I can do this on my own. That's what I did, by the way. Like I have like personal thoughts about like, well, what if I'd have just taken that extra step to like put myself in that environment rather than like try to consume something from that environment. It's trying to like take from it the whole time, you know, like go put your feet on the ground and like be next to people who are like dudes, and you'll see like where you're at, you know. You know, and then really just like the fundamental piece of like where I feel like my success in sports came from. I say it like that because I also can look at a lot of things I wish would have went differently or that I would do differently if I could go back, and truly that's not really how my brain operates. You know, I'm not like I feel like God did exactly in my life like what he intended, for my life. And I know that to my core. It's impossible as a competitor to look back and not be like, oh, well, if I could have, I'd have done different. But that's my motivation now, right? And like, well, for these kids, from what I've seen and what I've done, I've learned from it. So now I'd like to help them, because God also might be using me as a tool to help them have a different type of path, you know? Yeah. So that's like really important to me. I don't really view it as like, oh, I wish this would have happened. But things that I think that like allowed me to be successful, kind of some of those concepts, or like always believing my best days were ahead of me, always believing that the things that I needed were like embedded inside me, and like my training's job was to like pull that out of me, like that gives you such an inner like confidence of like, hey, you got to learn to throw a new pitch. Okay, it might take me a little while, but like, okay, I can do it, like cool, and then I don't know, the inner belief in yourself when like early on when things are going great, even later on when things are going great, it's so easy to believe in yourself, that self-belief when other people like don't believe in you. How to take like maybe some negative energy like that, whether it be from a teammate, from a coach, from a recruiter, from a scout, from a friend, whoever, and like learning how to take that and turn that negative energy into like a positive like motivating factor is like such a superpower, I think, for people that if I look back at like what I was able to accomplish, which in the grand scheme of things like isn't a ton in like baseball, but to check some of the boxes that 17-year-old Brett like really wanted to do, the things that allowed me to get there are like some of those characteristics, the willingness to like adapt and overcome, like the willingness to like look in the mirror and like really identify what I needed to do to like get better, like have a very honest like conversation with myself of like what's got to happen for that goal to be reached, and like and not sugarcoating things to yourself, and then being willing to put in the work, like to me that's like and maybe my brain's off in thinking about it this way, but to me, that's just like a non-negotiable. Yeah. Like you can't out of one side of your mouth say, I've got a goal to do something like this and then not be willing to put in the work. Then you don't have a goal. You've got a dream, but that's never going to happen. You're going to wake up and,
goal have tangible steps to get to where you want to be.
Yeah. So you want to sit there and tell me that you got a goal, then you better bring it with the work ethic, and to me, the work was easy because it was like fun, like it was what I loved to do. Like it didn't feel like work ever, like that's why I still do what I do now. I was on the mound yesterday. People are asking me like, "Are you trying to come back and play?" I was like, "Shit, no. Absolutely not. That ship sailed. I made a decision 2 years ago. Yeah. I can still throw 95, but I did that off season. Yeah, like it wasn't a physical like I just don't think I got it in me anymore. It was a personal like lifestyle decision, and I choose to like do that because it's just a part of who I am, like it's a piece of who I am and what I love to do, and that's why I did it and was able to overcome what I was able to overcome for so long because it was a love, like it was a love that so that's how if you're like cut out to do this, to pursue this, whatever you're pursuing, mind you. Like, it doesn't have to be baseball. It could be business.
We're talking sports.
It can be school. It could be a doctor. It could
change
be whatever.
variable X to whatever you want.
Absolutely. If you don't have that like burning, I love to use this analogy because I have orange hair, but hair on fire. If you don't have that, like when you wake up in the morning to like pursue your goals, then like I don't even think it is a goal. You know what I mean? I really don't believe that. I believe that you're like caught in dreamland somewhere, so like I remember going back to talk to the Mizzou baseball team one time just to kind of maybe share some of my story and how it impacted them at the like a first pitch dinner, and it was just like, man, like my point really in the entire like sharing of the story was that like, if you don't like something with where you're at, what you're doing, then do something about it. You know what I mean? Have the courage to do something about it. And if like you don't have the courage to do whatever it takes, then like you just don't want it bad enough. You might as well hang them up and go home right now, because there's a bunch of guys that are gonna come here and whoop your ass.
Yeah. You're just a slave to your lack of action.
Absolutely. You're gonna get worked if you don't. That's like that. You're talking about this grand pyramid of pyramid of like what you need to do to reach your goal. Like to me, buddy, that is the foundation. You ain't getting nowhere else unless you got that bottom one, So be willing to put in the work, and then immerse yourself in an environment where you educate yourself on how to work smarter, and not because you just can't keep working harder and harder,
Right.
Because of energy and time and
Yeah. Be willing to work hard
diminishing returns.
and be willing to learn twice as much.
No doubt. Amen.
100%. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah.
Like I said, we'll do another one where we'll talk a little bit more about what you're into in life after baseball as we transition subjects and topics within the podcast.
Yeah.
But super appreciate you coming on, sharing your
Yeah.
story.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Stay tuned. Make sure you like and subscribe. Brett Graves, everybody. See ya.